Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Hamza Rifat and these are the headlines. Pakistan has presented a dossier on India's war crimes and grave human rights violations in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, along with National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf, presented the 131-page dossier at a press conference in Islamabad. Exposing New Delhi's fake encounters and false flag operations, they said more than 8,600 mass graves have been found in 6 districts of Kashmir. The dossier reveals 30,000 people have been martyred since 2014. It says the occupation forces killed more than 650 women and raped nearly 3,900 others. The American government has released newly declassified record on September 11 terrorist attacks. The documents released by the FBI describe the contacts between the hijackers and their associates in the U.S. The documents offer no evidence that the Saudi government was involved in the plot. The United Nations Nuclear Agency has reached a deal with Iran to continue monitoring its nuclear facilities with surveillance cameras. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization chief, Mohammad Eslami, revealed this after talks with the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi in Tehran. Grossi is on his first visit to Iran since President Ibrahim Raisi assumed office in August. In Pakistan, at least 17 people have died after torrential monsoon rains and mudslides hit areas in northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Rescuers said the cloudburst induced flash floods caused widespread destruction in the Torgar district and damaged several houses. Brazil has reported over 700 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 14,000 more cases overnight. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 58 new deaths and over 3,100 infections in the last 24 hours. Globally, the death toll has reached 4.6 million, infecting over 224 million people so far. The news in detail after a short break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan has presented a dossier on India's war crimes and grave human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, along with National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf, presented the 131-page dossier at a press conference in Islamabad.
Pakistan has once again exposed Indian atrocities, including the occupying forces, fake encounters and false flag operations in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In the dossier, Indian military officer can be heard conveying Prime Minister Modi's direction of torturing people in Kashmir. According to the dossier, more than 8,600 mass graves have been found in 6 districts of Kashmir. The dossier reveals 30,000 people have been martyred since 2014. It says the occupation forces killed more than 650 women and raped nearly 3,900 others. Since 2014, more than 120 people have been killed and thousands others blinded with pellet gun fires. In the past 6 months, over 15,500 so-called search operations were conducted. The dossier says more than 10,000 people have been disappeared in the valley. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson said evidence reflects India is running 5 ISIS training camps in Kashmir. Nearly 30,000 Kashmiris have been tortured in 239 cells in northern Kashmir.
For more on this, we're joined by Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, who is a renowned defense analyst from Islamabad. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. My first question to you is, today Pakistan has presented some very hardcore evidence of Indian brutalities in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Do you think this will instigate the international community to raise the voice against Indian cruelties in the valley?
That's the, I think, whole aim of the exercise, to get the international community to understand what is going on in Kashmir, where the world is talking about what Taliban could possibly do or could not possibly do, and reminding the world of what Taliban did last time around, talking of human rights and talking of this right and that right. Very completely ignoring what is going on in India as a whole and Kashmir particularly. I think Pakistan has done the right thing at this point in time because the world is sensitive to these issues. This is one issue that has not evaded, frankly. The world has avoided facing this squarely. This time the world faces this human crisis, which is of immense proportions. I don't think so the world even starts to comprehend what is the plight of these Muslims who are trapped in Kashmir with over, I think, one soldier every 8 or 9 people. And
Yes.
17 to 18,000 of the young people have been abducted away to so-called re-educate them. So many people killed, murdered, butchered. And the latest was what they did to this very old and frail man who passed away and was
Yes.
supposed to be buried, basically forcibly buried. India is so scared. While he was alive, he was a thorn in the Indian side. And in his death, I think, he has proved to the world that what he was saying was always right. And the Indians have to be not only reined in, but the fact is that Kashmiris have to be given their rights as human beings. If the world expects Taliban to give rights to some of the people there, they expect rights, everybody else to give their rights, human rights to the others, be it France or the UK or the United States of America, with their own history of, I think, human rights being very, very checkered, to say the least. I think it's time for the world to realize this.
Absolutely, and it is basically a de facto state of apartheid that we're witnessing in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Now, sir, nowadays the world and the nations, the international community is busy highlighting human rights issues in Afghanistan, but they're pretty much silent towards the atrocities in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, as you rightly said. What do you think is the reason behind this dual standards approach of the international community?
I mean, the reason are very basic. We may not like to accept them, but they are very basic, right?
Right.
One is they are Muslims, and two, they are not of any commercial or economic value to the West per se. And third, of course, is that we are that block in the path of the world which expects. I'm talking of the free world, so-called free world, led by United States of America. We are the people who are actually standing solidly between them and what could lead to the world's destruction, and that they don't like. And when I say destruction, what I mean is that they expect the world to be ruled by them and to obey them in everything what they say. And that is what the problem is. Basically, it's as simple as that. But India, a Hindu state, and Brahman Zionism at its peak, disregarding humans as humans within their own community. I mean, over 60 to 70% of Hindus have they're not humans to these guys. So
Absolutely.
the world is not listening to anybody because India has offered itself to the factory floor and also offered itself to become their partners in the biggest crime this century is likely to happen. Is they're trying to go against China. They're trying to go against the progress of this region as a whole, be it Pakistan, be it Afghanistan, Central Asian republics and beyond, and the likely emerging economic scenario, geoeconomics as people are talking about. They are trying to thwart that, they're trying to block that, they're trying to actually destroy that, the whole process.
Right, so you think morality actually trumps economic considerations, or it's actually the other way around?
Frankly, if the world doesn't realize the implication of what it's doing to itself, and when I say world, I basically am talking about the free world because for America, America is the entire world. They hold the World Series of their own kind of football, what they have, and they don't invite anybody else, don't allow anybody else to participate in that, but they still feel that is the whole world. For them, two things are very critical. One is that nobody other than who is sanctioned by them should be able to raise their head. That means they want their power to be recognized, acknowledged, and the rest of the world to bow down in front of them. that is not what is the actual reality on ground. The world is not listening to them anymore.
Right.
The other world, the world which is where we belong, and the world where these poor Kashmiris belong to, world where these poor Muslims belong to. Look what they have done to Libya, to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan. Yes. What they have done to these countries over the years. In the last just 1 decade, they have destroyed the basic structure of states, and they expect them to come up to their expectations. I mean, their level of what they think is progress or development or the... So that is, I think, there's a dichotomy in the way they think, there's a dichotomy in the way they act. There's a huge differential between what the so-called deprived world is working for and what they want this deprived world to do. There's a huge differential that they must understand that even the poorer countries, even Pakistan is not ready to listen to them anymore.
Absolutely. Now, sir, final question. How much do you think India's ambitions of bringing demographic changes in the occupied valley go against international law, particularly UN Resolution 47? For some strange reason, the international community has chosen to ignore it.
I mean, I'll just recall November 1947, what happened in Jammu. Over 100,000 Muslims were massacred in just about 24 hours' time. Why? Where the world was in this region, the whole thing was up on the boil, in disarray. They chose that particular moment to inflict the kind of atrocities that the world is not even ready to acknowledge, just to change the demography of Jammu region, and they did that. They are applying the same in the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir right now. And the world is keeping quiet because the world has sanctioned India and they allowed them to go ahead with whatever India wants to do.
Absolutely.
This is what trying to stop. This is what Pakistan trying to tell the world that please stop that, because this could lead to very, very serious consequences. Why I'm saying that is that it could bring Pakistan and India to a situation where we go to war. And once you start the war, controlling that is anybody's guess. It gets beyond control, it's its own dynamics. These two nuclear powers are face to face. The rest of the 6 nuclear powers are in the region. China is just there. Russia is just there. America is just there. UK is just there. And Israel is just there. So where the world will be if this is allowed to go or explode into the world's face? This time the world, this is what I said. And this is what I'm saying time and again. This effort by Pakistan is to awaken the conscience of those people who think that they can allow this to go on sufficiently long enough for Pakistan to absorb that, for Kashmiris to absorb that, not realizing that the history of Kashmir and the Kashmiris is quite different to what the world thinks will like to happen.
Yes.
They are independent people. Like the Taliban have fought the world led by United States of America, America plus 48 countries. They have fought them to stand still, forced them to talk. And I think it's lucky that they talked and they got these people out, allowed them to get out safely. This is time for the world to recognize that it's time to get India freed from the clutches of these people. If you don't, the consequences could be India could possibly break up with very serious consequences. And I sometimes feel there's time for the world to recognize that this monolith called India, which never was a country, to force it back into that arena, that age where it has 3 to 4, 5 different major parts, and all of them then get cut to size and learn to live with what actually is their worth.
Absolutely, sir. Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa Saab, thank you so much for joining me on Indus News. Now, the U.S. government has released newly declassified record on the September 11 terrorist attacks. It is the first investigative record to be disclosed since President Joe Biden ordered a public release of the documents. The documents released by the FBI describe the contacts between the hijackers and their associates in the United States. The documents offer no evidence that the Saudi government was involved in the plot. Speculation of official involvement swirled shortly after the attacks when it was revealed that 15 of the 19 attackers were Saudis. Earlier, the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. said it supported the full declassification of all records to end the baseless allegations. Pakistan has sent the fourth consignment of humanitarian aid to Afghanistan's Mazar-e-Sharif city. Islamabad has already sent 3 planes of relief goods to Kabul, Kandahar and Khost in the last 3 days. In another development, Pakistan's envoy to Kabul, Mansoor Ahmad Khan, has met newly appointed Afghan Finance Minister Hidayatullah Badri. In his tweet, Khan said the two sides discussed trade and transit matters to facilitate the common people. The remains of a U.S. Marine have returned home on the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Sergeant Jahani Rosario was among 13 U.S. service members killed last month in a suicide bombing outside the Kabul airport. She was one of the last American service members killed in the 2-decade-long Afghan war. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, Boston Mayor Kim Janey, and Senator Ed Markey paid their respects to Picardo's family at the airport. She died as she was screening women and children at the Abbey Gate. She will be buried in her hometown of Lawrence. Russia says it is looking into the possibility of providing humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan. Russian ambassador to Kabul, Dmitry Zernov, however, said no practical agreements on the issue have been reached so far. Zernov said so far he saw no requests directed specifically at Russia, but Afghanistan is ready for economic interaction with Moscow. Zernov also said Russia, China, Pakistan and Iran were the only countries that kept their embassies in Kabul and did not flee. The Russian diplomat also attacked West's decision for freezing 3/4 of Afghan budget, adding that it will worsen the crisis. More news after the break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back. In Iraq, 2 explosives-laden drones have targeted Erbil International Airport, where U.S.-led coalition troops are stationed. There were no immediate reports of casualties. Kurdish security officials said the explosives landed outside the airport. A spokesperson for the semi-autonomous northern region dismissed reports the attack had impacted flights. He said the airport remained open and an investigation was ongoing by the Kurdish authorities. The attack is the first following a 2-month hiatus in drone and rocket attacks to target the U.S. forces in Iraq. The U.S. blames Iran-backed militias for the attacks. For more on this, we're joined by Dr. Arno Devele, international political analyst from Syria. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. The U.S. forces have been targeted again at the Erbil International Airport. Was this a deliberate strike on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks?
Well, one could analyze it like this. On the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, which basically led to an endless war strategy by the United States going after every country that they had decided to basically take out in order to engage in democracy building, quote unquote. It is a smashing reaction from the people in the region, the real sovereign forces in the region, that U.S. presence shall not be tolerated anymore.
Right, so now more recently the attacks have become more sophisticated, with the attackers using drones instead of the Katyusha rockets. Who is behind these attacks?
The means being employed by the Iraqi resistance, most likely benefiting from Iranian expertise in improving their arsenal, but also improving the means of delivering new explosive devices with more precision and more lethal effect. The idea being that the U.S. forces must feel that their fortifications and/or bases are not out of reach from any attempt by the resistance to evict them or to send them a message that their presence is not wanted anymore.
Now, there are some 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq apparently helping local forces counter what remains of the ISIS group there. But why do you think the terrorist attacks are rising in the country if that is the case?
Well, that's a good question. Was that the U.S. And its allies are essentially propping up terrorist organizations, not only in Iraq, but in Syria as well. And it's been a recurring problem for the resistance forces
be they in Iraq or Syria, have managed to secure the borders between the two countries so as to prevent the flow of those elements from one side to the other. And obviously, the results have been very efficient, and the Americans are trying to reactivate those cells by any means necessary, and using those already in place, so to speak, in order to intensify attacks and make themselves relevant again, should I say.
Right now, the U.S. had also announced to withdraw its forces from Iraq by the end of this year, but will continue to train the Iraqi military. Does Baghdad back the presence of U.S. troops in the country, or want a complete pullout akin to Afghanistan?
Yes, you are referring to the recent visit of the Iraqi Prime Minister to Washington, whereupon a consensual decision was arrived at, which basically invoked a requalification of U.S. forces' role in Iraq as technical advisors. But the idea is this whole thing is cosmetics in nature, and that the U.S. has no intention to altogether pull all of its forces out, despite the Iraqi parliament voting in favor of such pullout back in 2020, just after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. So we are seeing now basically two factions, at least two factions within the Iraqi establishment. One that is bent on getting the U.S. troops out of Iraq, the sooner the better, and the other faction, which is more likely to somehow collaborate, or at least feel the pressure of the United States in making sure that some U.S. presence remains in the country under whatever levelization you might want to invoke. For instance, some of the job descriptions have been requalified, and it is now question the issue of being more like NATO forces as opposed to purely U.S. forces. But it's all cosmetics. And the American, notwithstanding the requalifications and or relabelization of foreign presence in the country, are behind any attempt to prevent the Iraqi people from recovering their sovereignty.
Dr. Arnaud de Vele, thank you so much for speaking to me on Indus News. Now, moving on, Israel has yet again violated the May ceasefire with Hamas by launching air raids on the Gaza Strip. Israeli military says it struck targets belonging to the group in response to an alleged rocket attack from the Strip. It says the raids targeted an underground rocket production workshop, weapons storage site and training facility. The latest strikes come a day after Israel hit Hamas positions in the besieged enclave. Earlier, the regime troops also injured more than 170 Palestinians in a clampdown on protests in Nablus city. Staying with the Middle East, the Arab coalition says it has intercepted and destroyed an explosive-laden Houthi drone launched towards Saudi city of Khamis Moshet. In a statement, the coalition said it is taking strict measures to protect civilians. Meanwhile, the militia also targeted the port of Merka in Yemen with missiles and bomb-laden drones. Yemeni officials say the attack caused huge destruction to the port's infrastructure and burned the storehouses of some aid agencies. The United Arab Emirates condemned the attacks, calling them a blatant defiance of the global community and its disregard for all international laws and norms. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation also expressed its strong condemnation of the attacks. Brazil has reported over 700 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 14,000 more cases overnight. Globally, the COVID-19 death toll has reached over 4.6 million, infecting over 224 million people so far. More in this report.
Despite the rapid vaccination drives at the global level, many countries continue to face steep increases in infections and deaths. In the U.S., health officials are expected to authorize Pfizer vaccine for 5 to 11-year-old children by the end of October. Meanwhile, 3 U.S. studies suggest vaccines offer strong protection against the virus, even in the face of the highly transmissible Delta variant. Australia has purchased an additional 1 million doses of Moderna from the EU as the country accelerates its inoculation drive against surging infections. The country's most populous state, New South Wales, reported nearly 1,300 new locally acquired cases in the past 24 hours.
I want to see 80% first dose next week, and I'm confident we'll get there around Tuesday or Wednesday. And then my challenge to the New South Wales community is let's get to 90% the following week. And let's also work across our most disadvantaged communities to make sure that no one is left behind as we strive to have the most equitable distribution of vaccine of any country in the world. And that's my aspiration.
Over in France, violent clashes broke out at an anti-health pass protest when an unidentified group attacked demonstrators with sticks and walking crutches. In Greece, thousands of people marched against mandatory coronavirus vaccinations. Police used tear gas and water cannons to block them from reaching a trade fair where the Prime Minister was delivering his annual economic policy speech.
We came here to give a message to the government that we will not stop our fight. They're making fun of us with the changes that are coming to a new labor law that was recently passed hand in hand with the employers. We are shouting that we are here, we will resist, and we will continue our fight until the end.
In South Africa, health regulators have approved Pfizer vaccine for children aged 12 and older, paving the way to offer vaccinations to teenagers. Meanwhile, India logged 338 more deaths and over 28,500 new COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours.
Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, has become the first city to have at least 50% of its eligible population fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Taking to Twitter, Planning Minister Asad Umar said 71% of its citizens have received at least one shot. Meanwhile, Pakistan will begin vaccinating adolescents in the age group of 15 to 17 years from tomorrow. The country has reported 58 more deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, taking the death toll to over 26,700. So far, the virus has infected more than 1.2 million people in Pakistan. Pakistani nation is also remembering military officer Major Raja Aziz Bhatti on his 56th martyrdom anniversary. Bhatti was bestowed upon the Nishan-e-Haider for his actions of valor during the Battle of Burki with India in 1965. On the occasion, Pakistan's military said Bhatti's heroic feat inspires us to defend the country at all costs. In a tweet, the ISPR said Bhatti successfully repulsed Indian attack on Lahore with his gallant actions. Hailing from Gujarat, Bhatti joined the newly formed Pakistan Army in 1950. During the Indo-Pak War in September 1965, he defended strategic BRB Canal bravely for the 5 days until he was hit by an enemy shell and martyred. In Pakistan, at least 17 people have died after several houses collapsed as torrential monsoon rains hit northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Police said 11 bodies were recovered from the debris in the Torgar district. They said 3 houses in the Jatka village were completely swept away, while others were less affected. Rescue operations for those still trapped under the rubble is underway. In Aptabad, authorities said a mudslide in the suburbs also killed a couple and their child and injured 3 others. Typhoon Chantu has lashed the Philippines' northernmost islands, cutting power and damaging houses in its wake. The National Disaster Agency says over 11,000 people have been affected by the storm in the country. Chantu downgraded to a Category 3 storm from a Category 5 after it struck the northern islands of Batanes. Meanwhile, the typhoon caused heavy rainfall of up to 5 inches in Taiwan as its center passed the island's east coast while heading for Shanghai. Airline flights and train services were suspended in the island amid the storm. As per media reports, over 2,000 people were evacuated from flood-prone areas of the east coast county of Hualien. Over in the Chinese mainland, the government has issued a typhoon warning for Shanghai and also warned of possible torrential rains. In the United States, a new wildfire has broken out in South California across the arid hills of Los Angeles County near a major freeway. Local media says the blaze, which started in the afternoon at about 5 acres in size, spread to nearly 400 acres in only a few hours. It says the fire was burning along both sides of the Golden State 5 freeway near Castiac Lake, and a portion of the road was shut down in both directions. Officials say the fire had been 0% contained as of last evening, while 2 firefighters suffered burn injuries. The cause of the fire was not immediately known. Around 100 wildfires across the U.S. West have burnt an area as large as the state of New Jersey. Staying with the United States, the corridors of New York's subway are decorated with larger-than-life, vibrant glass mosaic murals that are aimed to move with the subway rider. More in this report.
The installation is the idea of renowned U.S. artist Nick Cave, who is best known for his exuberant sunsuits. The sunsuits are head-to-toe costumes made with a variety of fabrics, textures, and colors that cover the entire body of the wearer. Cave says his idea was to install a mosaic that moves along with the people passing through the corridor.
The corridor is this space that sort of navigates from A to point B and so it's all about movement. And that as you are walking and passing through, it is moving along with you. So that was really my idea was that it operated the same way in which the people were moving through the space.
The mural, called Everyone, is the first of a three-piece installation, with its sequels each one and equal all set to be completed next year. When completed, the artwork will cover 4,600 square feet and will extend from the Times Square to Grand Central subway stations. Cave says the artwork presents him with a new direction.
The thing is that I think as an artist, that, we can't limit ourselves to the means necessary. It's how do you remain open and available for a new point of view, a new direction to sort of present itself. And so for me, this presents a new direction.
The artwork is Cave's largest permanent public art and the largest mosaic project in the New York City transit system. It was unveiled as part of a public campaign to welcome riders back to the subway after the lockdown and to encourage the use of mass transit.
Now, the movie Happening, produced in 1963 on illegal abortion, has won the Golden Lion Award for the best film at the Venice Festival. More about the award ceremony in this report.
The Venice Festival Awards ceremony wrapped up the 11-day movie marathon, with many films held back because of the coronavirus pandemic. Stars from far and wide turned out in force on the Venice red carpet for the success of a festival. The movie Happening won big at the night. It increases complexity of a situation as young women confronts prison term or death due to termination. Film director Audrey Devant said that film's central theme is still relevant today as in 1963 when film was produced.
I did this movie with anger. I did the movie with desire also. I did it with my belly, my guts, my heart and my head. And I wanted Happening to be an experience.
Spain's Penelope Cruz won the Best Actress prize for playing a single mother in Pedro Almodovar's Parallel Mothers.
I would like to dedicate it to my great husband who's here with me, and my wonderful children, Luna and Leo, my family, but especially to two other parallel mothers in my life. My mother, Encarna, the best values, the best teacher, and my best friend. I love you, Mama.
While the Best Actor prize went to Joan Arcela from the Philippines for the film On the Job, The Missing Age. Meanwhile, Italian director Paolo Sorrentino was also awarded the Grand Jury Prize for the Hand of God film.
Time now for the weather report. And that's all that we have for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.